Okay, so today we're diving deep into two pretty interesting blockchain projects, Aptos and Sui, and we've been looking at their white papers and docs, trying to like really get down to the core of like what are their design philosophies, right? Like what are they trying to solve? What problems are they going after in this whole Web3 world?
Yeah, I mean it's all about kind of like the high level thinking here, right? Not so much getting lost in the code, but really understanding the fundamental why behind how these systems are architected. And, especially for the listener, we'll be highlighting those aspects that'll get you up to speed quickly on like the key differences and also where they share some common ground.
Cool, cool. So let's start with Aptos. Now, this has been in development for a while now, right? Like over 3 years with a pretty big team behind it. And from what I've been reading, they're really hammering on these core principles: scalability, safety, reliability, and upgradability. That seems to be a big one for them. They even compare themselves, like their overall goal, to something like cloud infrastructure,
Yeah.
becoming that super dependable, scalable, cost-effective foundation, always improving, ready for all the new and amazing Web3 applications that are popping up.
Yeah, it's that cloud comparison that's really interesting. They're not just building another blockchain, right? They're going for that foundational layer. Like they want to be what everything else is built on. And they're doing that by taking on those limitations that, let's be honest, have kind of held back previous blockchains, right? Outages, crazy high costs, security issues. Aptos is shooting for being like the internet itself,
Hmm.
like that level of reliable utility.
Right, right. And then we have SUI, which comes out strong, calling itself the first internet-scale programmable blockchain platform. Whoa, okay, big statement. And their emphasis is all about insane scalability, transactions that finalize instantly, a super safe smart contract language, or so they claim, the ability to handle really complex assets on chain, and basically, they want to create a much, much better experience for anyone using Web3 apps built on their platform.
Yeah, and if you zoom out a bit, both Aptos and Sui see the same thing. They get that for Web3 to really, truly take off, it's going to be powerful, yes, but also easy to use for everyone, both devs and D users. That internet scale thing that Sui keeps saying, that shows where their heads are at.
Right.
They want to handle huge volumes of transactions without things slowing down or costs going through the roof. They want to build a platform ready for mass adoption right now.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's get a little more into Aptos specifically. One thing that jumps out from their docs is their just huge focus on security. They've gone all in on this programming language called Move. Everything internally, all their transactions run on Move, and they argue this makes everything super fast A&D secure right from the start.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just using Move. They've got this thing, the Move Prover. And it's all about, think of it like formal verification. Basically, they're using math, like hardcore logic, to prove that a smart contract will always, always do exactly what it's supposed to do no matter what. The Move Prover is a tool that lets developers mathematically verify the smart contracts they build using Move. And this adds like a crazy level of assurance, right? Against errors, against malicious code. It's almost like you've got this guarantees, unshakable guarantee against bugs and hacks. And that's a whole other level of security.
So for developers on Aptos, this Move Prover thing sounds like a huge plus. It's like they've got this safety net built right in, so they can be way more confident that what they build is going to be strong, resistant to attacks. And for the listener out there, this focus on security, I think it should be reassuring, right? It shows that Aptos is designed to be trustworthy from the ground up. And hopefully that means, less of those scary headlines we see about hacks and exploits and all that.
Exactly. It's all about building a more trustworthy base, a more reliable base for, Web3 as a whole.
Hmm.
When we think about the user experience, how this all feels to the end user, Aptos has put a lot of effort into making that side of things smoother too.
For sure. They talk about how they have this data model that makes managing your cryptographic keys super flexible. It even supports like hybrid custodial options, which for people who are new to Web3 and might find that whole self-custody thing a little intimidating, I think this could be a big help to getting them on board, right? And then there's this other feature where you get complete transparency into a transaction before you sign it, so you know exactly what you're agreeing to, which is huge.
Right. That pre-signing transparency is key for trust. Like imagine being able to see everything, all the details, in plain language before you commit to anything. No more uncertainty, no more gotchas. And they also talk about having practical light client protocols. And basically, this means people can interact with the blockchain more securely and efficiently without having to run a full node themselves. Again, making things easier and safer for everyone.
Okay, now this is where it gets really cool, I think. Their approach to performance and scalability. They use this, get ready for it, pipeline and modular architecture for processing transactions. It's like they took the whole process from when a transaction is first broadcast to figuring out the order of blocks, to executing those transactions in parallel, storing the data, then finally certifying that the ledger is all good. They broke it all down and engineered it so all these stages can run at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like a super efficient assembly line, but for transactions and moving at warp speed. By letting all these stages run concurrently, they squeeze the most out of their hardware. So you get highly parallel execution, which is how they hit that high throughput, processing tons of transactions fast with low latency, meaning those transactions get confirmed quickly.
And the real magic, I think, is in that parallel execution. They're saying that, unlike some other parallel systems, their engine can handle even super complex transactions that touch a ton of different data without needing the developer to tell it beforehand which data it'll need. Like, that just sounds way easier for developers, right?
Oh, it is. It's a huge advantage. See, in a lot of parallel systems, devs have to basically know exactly what data a transaction will touch, read, and write to ensure atomicity, meaning all parts of the transaction either completely succeed or completely fail together, so your data stays consistent. But Aptos does that automatically, even for complex transactions, which makes building things way simpler and avoids a common performance bottleneck. The insight here is that they're solving a fundamental issue with parallel processing. In so many systems, developers have to bend over backwards to make sure data stays consistent when you've got transactions running in parallel. Aptos handles that automatically, which opens up a whole world of possibilities for building complex, high-throughput applications without, giving developers a headache. It's a core innovation in how you actually scale a blockchain.
Got it. So thinking about the future, upgradability seems to be another core principle for Aptos. They built this modular architecture that's flexible for client software and, importantly, lets them do upgrades often and smoothly. The goal is to move away from those disruptive, time-consuming hard forks that can sometimes split communities, right?
Exactly. Their on-chain change management, how they have that set up, is all about making it super fast to deploy new tech and support new use cases in Web3. Being agile, being adaptable, that's key
Yeah.
in a world that's changing as quickly as blockchain.
And it sounds like they're already thinking about even more scaling down the road. They mentioned things like, okay, get ready, internal sharding of a validator and homogeneous state sharding. Basically, what this means for you, the listener, is that they're looking at ways to scale the network horizontally, to boost its capacity so it can handle even more transactions. And the cool part is they want to do this without making things super complicated for the people running the network nodes. Think of sharding, splitting a huge database into smaller, more manageable chunks. Aptos wants to apply this to their blockchain, dividing the workload across these shards, so they can process way more transactions simultaneously without each individual node having to handle the entire load. That's how you achieve massive scalability.
Right on. They're building with growth in mind. They're aiming for a platform that can adapt and scale as demand grows without, overwhelming the people who keep the infrastructure running.
Smart. Okay, let's switch gears over to Sui now. Their whole thing is internet scale, right? So no surprise that scalability is a huge deal for them too. They specifically call out horizontal scalability as what makes them different.
And what's interesting here is that they say the network can handle more transactions as you add more validator processing power. So basically, as you bring more worker nodes online, that's horizontal scaling in a nutshell. And the benefit they push is, wait for it, low gas fees, even when the network is super busy, which is a total contrast to some blockchains out there that just get slammed with high fees when things get congested.
That's big, isn't it? We've all heard the horror stories about trying to do something simple on a blockchain and the fees are just outrageous because the network's overloaded. Sui wants to solve that to avoid those capacity bottlenecks that drive costs up. It's all about efficiency, about cost effectiveness, right? Especially for you, the listener. If you've ever been frustrated by those unpredictable, crazy gas fees, Sui is trying to build a better way. They're aiming for consistently low costs no matter how much activity is happening on the network.
Yeah, totally. Now, another thing Sui has in common with Aptos is that they've also embraced the Move programming language. And they talk a lot about how safe it is, how much better it is for developers.
Yeah, they specifically say that Move prevents whole categories of vulnerabilities that have been a problem on other blockchains. Reentrancy attacks, those poison tokens that can mess up entire ecosystems, even the risk of someone approving tokens without realizing it. So they're making a strong case for security here.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
And they also point out how Move, because it's so safe and expressive, can actually make it easier for developers to move from that traditional Web 2 world into Web 3. Their argument is that devs can focus on the logic of what they're building without needing to be, total blockchain experts. And that's going to be huge for bringing more developers on board, developers with all kinds of different backgrounds.
For sure, for sure. I mean, that's important for so many people, right? Whether you're already a blockchain wizard or just starting out, having a development environment that's safe and easy to use it's huge. Okay, no, Sui also makes a big deal about innovation when it comes to on-chain assets. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this is where you see some of their really unique thinking. They're talking about building rich and composable on-chain assets.
Hmm.
Think about it like this. We've got basic fungible tokens, like your standard cryptocurrencies, right? And we've got NFTs, which are unique digital collectibles. But Sui wants to go way beyond that. They give the example of dynamic NFTs. These are assets that can actually change, that can be upgraded, bundled together, grouped in ways that are specific to the application they're being used in.
So like in a game, right, they use that example, like maybe your avatar changes as you progress, or you combine different items to get new abilities. So the NFT isn't just a static thing, it can actually evolve. It can interact with the game in deeper ways. And the key is that all of this is happening on chain, totally transparently.
Right. And this makes the in-game economies way more interesting.
Yeah.
Because now the NFT isn't just a picture, it's a dynamic asset with real utility, and all of that behavior is verifiable because it's on the blockchain.
Right.
That makes those assets more valuable, more engaging.
Cool. And the last thing, Sui really pushes this idea of making Web3 accessible. They clearly want to be the platform for developers who want to build great user experiences in Web3. They talk about bringing the next billion users into Web3, which is a pretty big goal.
Yeah, and their Sui development kit, their SDK, is a big part of that. It's all about giving developers the tools they need to build without limits, to not get bogged down in the complexity of blockchain and really focus on creating amazing, user-friendly applications.
So let's step back and try to sum up some of the key differences, the big picture philosophies here. Aptos, they're all about strong security, smooth upgrades. They want to be that solid, dependable base that other things can be built on, and they're focused on continuous improvement.
Yep, that's a great summary. And Sui, on the other hand, they're really focused on that horizontal scalability, being able to handle huge numbers of users, and on letting developers create really innovative, interactive on-chain assets. They want Web3 applications to feel dynamic, responsive, and ready for mass adoption.
It's interesting, isn't it? Both platforms have chosen to use Move. They both see it as a key to building a more secure foundation. It kind of shows how much the industry as a whole is starting to prioritize security, especially after, all those high-profile exploits we've seen.
Totally. It's a sign that things are changing, that security is becoming a top priority. And it's clear that both Aptos and Sui are taking those challenges of scalability, security, and usability head on. They're both trying to solve the problems that have held blockchain back to make it more mainstream.
And for you, the listener, understanding these different approaches is really important. These platforms represent different paths forward for Web3. Knowing how they work, what they prioritize, it helps you see where different kinds of applications might fit best, how this whole landscape is going to evolve.
For sure. There's no single right answer here, right? These platforms are carving out their own spaces within Web3, each with their own strengths and weaknesses based on the choices they've made.
Right. So, just to recap, Aptos is all about strength, about that solid foundation and being able to evolve smoothly over time. They want to be the reliable backbone of Web3. Sui, they're pushing the limits with dynamic on-chain assets with massive scalability. They want to be ready for huge numbers of users for truly mainstream adoption.
And this leads to a really interesting question for you to think about. Given these different approaches, these different philosophies, what kinds of applications, what kinds of use cases do you think would be a perfect fit for Aptos and for Sui? And maybe even more importantly, how do you think these different choices, these architectural differences, are going to shape the future of Web3? What kind of long-term impact will they have? It's something to think about as you continue to explore this exciting and rapidly changing space.
A lot to think about for sure. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Yeah, always a pleasure to be here.